I've been wanting to speak to Chris Manning for quite a while now. On Instagram, he is known as Mindfulness Man. And if you've listened to this podcast, if you read any of the stuff I write, you'll know I'm all about mindfulness. But I had a sense that I had done mindfulness to death a little bit. I've spoken to quite a few people already about it. And, it's good to keep things varied. This podcast, it's got a new name now. And the name is Being Better, about how to be and how to be better. And that's not just about mindfulness, that covers all kinds of things. And so I thought it was time to maybe take a break from mindfulness. But then Chris posted something on his Facebook group, which is called Mindfulness in Daily Life. And it was from this book, which is The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. This has been quite an influential book in my life, and there are a lot of things in here which I have taken away. But the thing that Chris talked about was this thing called the sphere of concern. So where we place our energy, the things we worry about, all this kind of stuff. And then there is another sphere or circle called the circle of influence. So you have the sphere of concern and the sphere of influence. And our influence is the things we can actually change. So on the one hand, we have all the things we're worried about. On the other hand, we have all the things we can change. And the more active we become in that sphere of influence, the things we can change, the smaller our sphere of concern gets. And Chris posted something on his Facebook group that immediately attracted my attention about this, because that whole notion of the sphere of concern and the sphere of influence hadn't really resonated with me very much. So I wanted to find out more about it. So I reached out to Chris finally, and we sat down for a Zoom chat about these two ideas. And then we got into some other areas of mindfulness, and it just kind of went off on its own. And it's a great conversation. We touch on lots of things, and we could have gone on for hours, but time is always an issue with these things. So I hope you enjoy it. Like I said, this podcast, I've given it a new name. You might notice some changes over the last few episodes. It's got a new theme tune, and it's got a new name. It's called Being Better. So the whole point of this is that I've been on a journey for a few years now in terms of going from a place where I felt completely powerless in my life to a place where I'm beginning to feel like actually I'm starting to own it a little bit. And it's my journey talking to people about all the different things you can do in order to find the confidence, overcome those internal obstacles to taking control and owning your own life and really living. And I hope you appreciate that. I also kind of rebranded my the videos for this as well. So I hope you enjoy this conversation with me and Chris Manning, and I hope you will stick with the podcast, subscribe, rate it if you like it, because every episode we're speaking to more interesting people, and I'll talk a little bit more about that at the end. But in the meantime, here's me talking to Chris Manning about spheres and circles of concern and influence from this book by Stephen R. Covey. And then we get into some other areas about mindfulness as well. All right, cheers. Okay, so Chris Manning, you are the man behind the Facebook group Mindfulness in Everyday Life. You go by the handle Mindfulness Man on Instagram and various social accounts. And I've talked about mindfulness quite a lot on this podcast already. But it's the kind of everyday life bit that I find really interesting, because people think about mindfulness, they kind of, there is this image of it that it is a bit woo-woo, a bit kind of people who've got nothing better to do sitting around meditating all day long. But actually, it's a practical skill, isn't it, to getting by in life and kind of just owning life, I would say. What's your angle, if you like? Where do you come from with mindfulness?
Well, I actually love the woo-woo.
Yeah.
I'm all about the woo-woo. I come at mindfulness from years, like 16 or so years of Buddhism and yoga and all of that. So it's that side of it, the spiritual side, that got me interested, really.
Okay.
Looking to attempt to attain enlightenment. I actually wanted to be a monk. I had 2 small children. I was married, recently married, and I then discovered Buddhism in a big way. And I went from being quite happily married with 2 kids to wanting to become a monk.
And how did that go down with how did that fit in with the 2 kids and being happily
Not well
married?
at all.
Okay.
Not well at all. I was running off to retreats the whole time. I was meditating 4 or 5 hours a day. I got addicted. I fully was committed to that. I had endless arguments with my wife.
Because you would have thought that all of these practices are supposed to make your life easier in a way. It's that kind of detachment from suffering. But it sounds like it actually made your life a lot harder.
It did make it much harder, actually. There's a chant in Buddhism, and it says beautiful in the middle. Sorry, beautiful in the beginning, beautiful in the middle, and beautiful in the end. But mine was really quite a disaster in the beginning. And I think one of the reasons was, I've had anxiety and depression, undiagnosed, but I now know, all my life. And then this came along. I started meditating and I just felt amazing. All my worldly ambition dropped away. I was single focused on this goal of meditation. Nothing else mattered. And it's really selfish when I look back, but I saw a way to a better life, and I just dived in. I just dove in like feet first.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's always been the spiritual side. And as much as I appreciate secular mindfulness, I think it's great what it can do. I also think that they're just the side effects. There's something much, much bigger going on than getting rid of anxiety and all the rest of it. There's something much bigger occurring.
What do you think that is?
I think it's in us all, really, the desire to self-actualize, to fully understand what we are. And as you start meditating, you get glimpses of this, especially if you meditate seriously. If you're meditating for hours, you reach quite extraordinary states, and you're opening a door in many senses, and a door that's never been opened. I guess a lot like psychedelics would be. So you're seeing into a world of immense potential, and you're drawn in. You want more and more of it.
Do you think that, I have a kind of a feeling that, and I had this conversation yesterday. I spoke to Martha Beck, who is one of America's kind of best known life coaches. And she had this conversation about how the world we live in and this kind of system of 9 to 5, Monday to Friday, voting for whoever you believe in, going to the supermarket, this man-made system that we're a part of is very, very processed. And if you eat a lot of processed foods, you upset your kind of natural biological state. And similarly, when we're going about our day in this highly processed way, we're upsetting our natural spiritual state. But you talk about opening this door to something much, much deeper. Can that be compatible with the
very much so,
where we need to be in life?
Yeah, very, very much so. The thing is, I think a lot of it depends on where you're coming from. But when it first hits, you get this taste of emancipation, and well, at least I did.
Yeah,
it's different for different people, but eventually, you do learn how to integrate that into your daily life, which is why I called the group Mindfulness in Daily Life, because it's got so many benefits, so many incredible benefits to your everyday. You pull yourself out of holes you wouldn't otherwise see yourself digging. You know, you can feel yourself going the wrong way and you can stop. We were talking earlier, you and I, about the 7 habits. And I love something that Stephen Covey says, and he nails mindfulness. That's the book.
Yeah, this book. Just if anyone's listening and they can't see me holding up this book, it's I kind of got myself into a bit of a dark place for a period, and then started reading self-help books, and a few of them I kind of plateaued a bit with them. So I kind of read a few, and they had a big impact on me. And after that, some of the books that I was reading didn't have such a big impact anymore. But one of the ones that really made a big difference was it's called The 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen R. Covey. And it's basically ways of looking at your life and how to become more effective in your own transformation from someone who's out of control and not in control of your life to taking control of your life. And there was one bit that didn't really stick with me, and that was this spheres of influence and spheres of kind of control. And I didn't quite get my head around that, but you started posting something about that, and I thought I would like to know more.
Yeah, I'll come on to that definitely in one sec. But where I see mindfulness and this 7 habits relating is something that Stephen Covey says, which is in between stimulus and response, there is a space. So something happens and we react, we respond. But this space is where I'm interested in, because something happens. The other day, for instance, I got stung by a wasp. Now, a reaction would be kill it, freak out, scream, whatever. And I just felt the pain.
Yeah.
I did nothing about it. I didn't react. I picked up a piece of paper, caught it, and let it out. I risked being stung again, which was fine. It hurt, my legs swelled up, but I didn't add anything to that. So the Buddha talks about the second dart. So you've got the first dart, which is the pain of life. It's inevitable. Pain is inevitable in this life, but that's not the pain that does the damage. What the damage comes from what we do with that pain, how we react to it. And that was living proof. Yes, it hurt, but I added nothing to it. I was like, completely fine. It's okay. Yeah. So it's throbbing. That's fine.
I mean, this is something that, you know, there's so much that we hide behind. And that is the output. You talk about the kind of stimulus and the output, the input and the output. And I've been writing about this today on something else, but this output often becomes something we get so attached to that we think it is us, whereas we are somewhere actually in between the two. The real us is somewhere in between. So this whole idea of output, you know, someone says something and you react angrily, and so you kind of say, well, I'm just an angry person. Or someone kind of pushes your buttons and you retreat and you say, well, I'm just not confident enough. And they become kind of masks that you attach yourself to because you don't know what else to attach yourself to. But actually you're in that space. The real you is somewhere in that space.
Yeah, absolutely. I would say this space that he's talking about is what mindfulness is all about. It's that things occurring around us, stimulus, and normally there is this space, but people just go into a groove and off they go. You know, somebody presses a button and reaction.
Yeah.
But mindfulness really widens this space and you get to choose. You sit in this space, which, as you've just been referring to, is kind of your true nature. So you're in this space and you can make a decision. Which way do I want to go? Do I want to get angry? Do I want to scream and shout? Or do I want to maybe not even communicate? Do I want to be silent? It's, it's incredible.
You've obviously been doing this for a very long time, this kind of recognizing this inner process within you. So you get stung by the wasp, and then you are well trained in halting that almost automatic process. But does it mean you have to be on guard every minute of the day to try and catch yourself out almost, and catch your automatic processes? Or can you just slow things down and, just let that interruption, become natural? Do you see what I mean?
Yes, I see.
Because it sounds like hard work.
Yeah, I knew that's what you were getting at.
Yeah.
So, and I've read something once about this guy. He'd done a couple of years of mindfulness, and he said, I gave it up. It was just exhausting, to always be on guard, like you said.
Yeah.
It's just too much work. But I would say that he completely misunderstood it, and perhaps didn't even experience it at the level where it is emancipating. And for me, let me think about this for a moment. So for me, it's a mental freedom. It means I'm not wasting, if I do a lot of practice, if I'm meditating for 2 or 3 hours a day, my energy levels are huge, because all of this baggage we're carrying around with us all the time, we just drop it. We're just constantly dropping the baggage all the time, dropping it. So we travel much lighter. So we have much more energy. The mind's not being taken up and used with all of this stuff that we don't want now. This worry of opinions about us, this insult that occurred. We can just drop it all and be here, centered, in our presence, with none of that extra weight. And that's really, really freeing in a big way.
There's this whole idea of the kind of circle of influence. So the way I kind of see things generally is there are things we can control and things we can't control. So we can control with practice and with a little bit of effort what we think, what we feel, and what we do. So those are the three things that we can actually, those are pretty much the only three things we can control. We can't control what other people think. We can't control whether it's going to rain today or tomorrow. We can't control if we're going to cross the road and someone's going to, a bus is going to come and we're looking the wrong way or something like that. By learning to control these three things, we can actually start to influence, have some effect on the other things that we can't control, because of the way we're turning up in the world. So, if you're stomping around and you're a terrible, angry person and you're hiding behind this mask of anger, the world will reflect that energy back to you, because you're going to be upsetting people and you're going, you're bashing about, knocking things over, you've just broken your mug. That makes you even more angry, and it's this kind of feedback loop. Whereas if you're, going around with positive, good energy, then you it's like when you smile at someone, they smile back, and it's that same kind of thing. So you start to have this, you start to see opportunities, you start to see things going more in your direction. In practical sense, has your life improved as a result of this kind of inner practice? Has your business improved? And
the circle of influence versus the circle of concern.
Right.
Very much so. Very much so. In fact, my wife, if she ever sees me, because I've taught it to her, I've taught this to so many people. In fact, I taught it to a good friend, and he lives by it as if it's a Bible to him.
Yeah.
I can see myself now, and I can ask, which circle am I in? Am I in the circle of concern, or am I in the circle of influence? And it's just so clear. If you're doing something that, as you say, is out of your control, worry and stressing about things, you're definitely in the wrong circle. And Stephen Covey says something quite amazing, which is the more you put your energy into your circle of influence, the bigger it grows. So there's outward arrows.
Yeah.
That energy increases and you gain more influence and more influence, no matter how small you start. And the opposite is also true. If you're in the circle of concern, all the time, those arrows are coming in and making smaller your circle of influence. A classic example would be, so you're, forgive me, I've lost my train of thought on that.
While we're getting it back, so the circle of concern is things that we're worried about, perhaps, that we have no control over.
Yeah.
Is that right? This is where I think Stephen Covey lost me a little bit. So you have this one circle, and then the circle of influence is the stuff we can actually do. So we can go to the gym. We can be more active in our listening when we have a conversation. We can focus on our well-being, our strengths rather than our weaknesses, and just all of those kind of things. And the more so what you're saying is the more we focus in on that circle of influence, the smaller the circle of concern gets, because we're actually starting to take ownership.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah. So it expands, and you're in that circle and it's growing the whole time. People are gaining a faith in you, for instance. Yeah. And so therefore tasks which they may not have given you before, they're now trusting you because your influence is growing.
Yeah. Because and I suppose when your circle of influence is very small, that's when you feel disconnected from life. You feel powerless, worthless, because you don't feel like you have any control over what's happening to you.
Yeah, absolutely. He also speaks about it the other way, and he uses retired people who have become rich as having a huge circle of influence, but they don't really care.
Yeah.
Their compassion is quite small. They're like, they become selfish because their whole life has been about them and their great big influence. So there actually does need to be some balance there.
How do you manage that? Because I mean, all of this kind of self-work, if you want to call it, this kind of looking inside. I mean, like you said at the very beginning, you were meditating for hours and hours on end and disappearing off to retreats, and it did actually cause some friction and upset in your life, in your circle of influence or whatever, or circle of concern. So how do you balance that kind of focus on yourself without becoming completely selfish and without stomping on other people's feelings, and use it to nurture a kind of sense of compassion and empathy as well?
Well, there's other practices that go hand in hand with mindfulness, such as compassion practices, loving kindness practices. And this is the thing. I've heard it said that the wisdom side is one wing of a bird and the compassion side is the other wing. You actually need both.
Yeah.
I actually lacked compassion and loving kindness. I was in my own bubble. I wanted to escape, and I didn't do it because I was given an ultimatum and I didn't take it. But I even almost left my children, which is shocking to me now that I would have done that. How could I have ever hoped to have been happy doing that?
There are dangers then. There are dangers that you can become so absorbed in this kind of journey of inner discovery and inner relief and escapism, I suppose, that you forget your kind of responsibilities and your place here in the physical, measurable world, and just kind of lose yourself in the kind of spiritual journey.
Yeah, that's a trap that can easily happen. It did to me. I think this is why we need to be more well-rounded, and we need, you see, what secular mindfulness has also done and I'm not down on secular mindfulness. I think it's great. It does some amazing things. But I had a conversation with someone once, and he said to me, what's ethics got to do with any of it? This is just about being aware. But
Yeah.
you can be aware, you can crack a safe. If you look at a safe cracker, they're super aware, but what they're doing with that awareness is wrong.
But I mean, it's an awareness on a different level. It's not, it's not a scientific awareness, a kind of, I mean, you hear, I've forgotten his name now, who wrote the 12 Steps to Life, or whatever it's called, the 12, I've forgotten his name now, but
I
he's
think I know the book you mean. Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
Is it Ray someone? Is it the Prince something Principles?
Yeah, that's right. I think so.
I think it's Ray somebody. I've seen that book around. I've not read it.
But he is a very logical person. He has a lot of arguments about language and the way we use things, but he's also very emotionally detached, I think. So there isn't a lot of compassion. He just says, this is society, and society needs to function this way. So we need these people over here, we need those people over there, but there's no thought to these people actually being people. It's a very logical approach to life. Whereas I feel like mindfulness and this journey inside is awareness of our own inner processes. It's sort of embracing our emotions, whether they're good or bad, whether they hurt or whether they're liberating and joyous, and understanding where they're coming from and why they're and using them as a tool. So, I mean, there is a kind of personal morality in mindfulness, I guess. I mean, can you be a sociopath and still practice mindfulness?
Totally, yeah. Yeah, you could. And you could probably use the skills gained for bad. I know, I've even heard of snipers practicing mindfulness because it will make them much better snipers, because their focus will be so much sharper, their awareness of what's happening will be so much more powerful that it can really, I'm not saying snipers are sociopaths,
No.
but you absolutely could, yes.
And I suppose if you are going into war and you're a trained killer, it gives you kind of tools for dealing with the emotions that arise from those situations.
Fear and disgust, and yeah, absolutely.
And I mean, John Kabat-Zinn uses meditation and these kind of tools for dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder and things like this as well.
Yeah.
So actually there is a potentially a darker side to it. There is an unethical side to it. So I mean,
I would say I wouldn't have called myself at all a good person before I started practicing. I think I've become a better person because of it. I'm pretty sure of it. In fact, I know I have.
Yeah.
100%. If I think back to some of the stuff I did, 20 years ago, I wouldn't dream of doing it now. Wouldn't dream of doing it. Hurting people's feelings and caring more about myself and everyone else can go to hell. I'm not like that anymore. And I think when you start digging deep into yourself, it's almost quite natural that compassion begins to arise, because you touch something that many times brings you to tears, and you're brought to tears because of the suffering in the world.
Yeah.
Many times. So you're touching something deep within, this connection that we all have that you otherwise would never, ever touch. And I think people quite often only get to touch that on their deathbed, when they reflect back and go, and I think this could be the whole meaning of hell, to be stuck in a hospital bed with memories of dark things you've done without any consideration for anyone else. And there's no time or energy to put any of it right. That to me would be a hell.
I mean, do you think a lot of people get into this and they have their kind of moment of realization? I don't want to call it awakening because, that's all this talk about being woke and all that kind of stuff. It has all kind of.
Oh, that's gone a different way. That's quite a twisted. That's just gone ridiculous.
Yeah.
I
So,
have nothing to do with that woke
no,
mentality.
absolutely.
That's just,
But
for me, that's just another excuse. That's just another extremism. It's totally not what the Buddha or mindfulness is about. Mindfulness is, and what especially as the Buddha taught it, is about walking the middle way and looking at both sides. But the woke mentality is like angry and
it's very,
determined, and it's not even close to
very
what
much of the ego.
yeah, very much so. It's my way or nothing.
Do you think there is this kind of this realization, this kind of moment of awareness? You struggled. You had some dark times. I sort of came into it when I was at a very low point. I know other people have had. I mean, even people like Sharon Salzberg and Jack Cornfield. They've both had traumatic experiences, hard upbringings, abusive relationships, and things like this. Do you think that's where it comes from? Do you think that is the natural, when you've been broken down to a certain degree? Do you think one of the natural responses is this kind of sense of awareness and inner seeking?
I do, yes. I think if we pretty much all have, but I think the darker your mind has been as a place to live, the more the slightest glimmer of light, somebody turns on a switch somewhere and you see light at the end of, which is what happened with me.
Yeah.
I saw this light and I was like, I ran for it. So yeah, suffering is, I think it's a prerequisite. In fact, I can't imagine anyone who's not had difficulties wanting to sit for 10 days in a little room and not speak. My colleagues think I'm absolutely crazy when I take my time out, my holiday time, to go and sit for 10 days in silence and eat one meal and wake up at 4:30. They're like, I don't get it. I do not get why you're doing this. Yeah. It just sounds insane to them.
Do you think that is a kind of our world, our jobs, our society, our responsibilities, paying the mortgage, all that kind of stuff, is kind of squeezing us and hurting us and making us sick, and then we need that release almost? Do you think if we lived a more natural life, we wouldn't need mindfulness? We wouldn't need these practices of meditation?
I think if we lived a more natural life, a life more in harmony with nature, we'd be happier, and we'd naturally be more mindful, we'd naturally be more aware. But if you think back, this goes back thousands, at least 2,500 years ago, and it goes back to a time way before the technologies we have now, a much more peaceful existence, a time when people did live in complete harmony with nature and they still needed it.
Yeah.
I think suffering, when I say suffering, people mistake what that actually means, but it doesn't mean like writhing in agony. It means the root, I do know the root of the word and everything, but it basically means to carry more than you can bear, to attempt to carry more than you can bear. The unnecessary, if you like. So I liken it, as I said earlier, it's almost like we're carrying a rucksack around with us and we're filling it with rocks the whole time. And that's what suffering is. It's carrying more than you need to be carrying. And it's in every spiritual tradition talks about, if you're even going to go into Christianity, they say things like, God doesn't give you more than you can handle. That's another way of saying if you're in the present moment, you can take anything. And I firmly believe that. I firmly believe if we are in the present moment, we're fine.
Yeah.
And in fact, there's a great teacher. I really like him, Shinzen Young. And he dropped a phrase in one of his audiobooks, and I was like, wow, that is probably the most powerful thing I've ever heard. And he said, no loss of mindfulness, no suffering. So if you're able to keep your mindfulness, if you're able to be in the present moment, you don't suffer. And maybe this is what awakening is. Maybe full enlightenment is that we are fixed in that present moment. Our mind is trained to such a degree it doesn't dance in a direction we don't want it to dance. And so suffering ceases.
It reminds me of that poem, and I can't remember exactly the words, but it goes along the lines of, if you can keep your head while all around you are losing theirs.
Absolutely beautiful.
But
If by Kipling.
is that the one? And then it ends with
Kipling. Yeah.
the world and everything in it will be yours, or something like that. And
well, interestingly, he was brought up in India during, I think during British occupation. He was, quite well to do, probably something to do with the Raj. I really don't know. But I know he spent his childhood in India, and he's clearly influenced by Indian philosophy when he wrote that, very clearly influenced.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, we are close to coming up to time. I know you've got other responsibilities and that kind of thing, but I've really enjoyed this conversation.
Yeah,
so
me too.
I'll wrap it up for the moment. If people want to find out more, so this community on Facebook is growing. It seems to be exploding at the moment. So it's called Mindfulness in Daily Life.
Yeah.
So is that just where you find it? You just go to Facebook, search for Mindfulness in Daily Life?
Yeah, you can do that. And that will bring you to us. Or I'm on Instagram quite a bit, and that's at Mindfulness Man. I'm actually more active on Facebook now, because I left Facebook a long time ago, but now I think it's more intimate. You actually get to actually chat to people more. People will speak more. It's less hit and run. So yeah, Mindfulness in Daily Life in Facebook that's growing really quickly.
I've certainly found your group to be one of the more friendly ones. I have been a member of and left various groups around kind of Buddhism, Eckhart Tolle's philosophies, Alan Watts' philosophies, and things like that. And sometimes, considering they are supposed to be Buddhist stroke mindful stroke stoic groups, there's a lot of ego going on in those places. And people can be quite cruel when you come in with an innocent question. I've seen people being treated quite harshly. So yours is one of the friendlier groups to be.
I've kicked about 10 of those guys out already.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's not a place for that. I anybody that even remotely begins to start flexing like that, I've got no time for it. It's not nice.
Well, I think it needs to be a nurturing environment, especially when you're going into something like this, and you can feel quite vulnerable because you're
absolutely. People are discussing their own mental health. You don't want some guy, just ripping.
Yeah, because apparently, according to him, you've got it wrong, even though there's no necessarily right or wrong. But no, there's a fantastic. This time has gone so quickly. I couldn't believe it. I thought we'd go on for much longer, but I'm going to leave it there. So Mindfulness in Daily Life and Mindfulness Man on Instagram. So thank you so much. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you so much. Lovely speaking to you.
And you as well. Thanks a lot. All right, so I hope you enjoyed that conversation. I got a lot out of it, and we were riffing quite well there on all different topics of mindfulness. I never thought of it as something that could be actually have a bit of a dark side to it. It could be something that could become a bit of an obsession. So I'm going to be exploring lots more areas in the next coming issues about how to be and how to be better. And in my next conversation, I really get into some very interesting topics with America's best-known life coach, Martha Beck. So I hope you enjoyed that one, and I hope you've enjoyed all the previous ones so far. I just do these on my laptop and on my phone, and there's no reason why we can't use what we've got, start where we are to achieve a life of greatness and of great things that we enjoy and make us feel content, enriched, and fulfilled. All right, thanks a lot.